All rise. Pledge allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Fryrick?
Here.
Mr. Posnow?
Here.
Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Sanders?
Here.
Mr. Scolette?
Here.
Mrs. Schrader?
Here.
Mr. Sears?
Here.
Mr. Toman?
Here.
Mr. Watts?
Thank you. This is the first opportunity for public comment. All comments and questions will be addressed to the president. Board and staff members will not normally respond to comments or questions during the meeting unless recognized by the president for this purpose. Comments will be limited at the discretion of the president to 5 minutes or less. Do we have anybody that would like to speak? Thank you. You have the minutes here from the regular monthly meeting of October 15th, 2018, and the planning committee meeting of November 5th, 2018. If I offer them up, if there are no changes or concerns, I submit it for approval as they stand. Thank you. Mr. Sears.
As usual, the treasurer's report is consent agenda. There are the 6 items listed, or 7 items below. I know you all spend a lot of time poring over the detail. One thing I do like to report, however, is our monthly interest, because I think it's significant and it's worth getting in the record. For October, the number was $148,346, which is not too bad. Some of that's actual, the rest of it's projected based on interest rates and account balances. Would any of the board members like any of the items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of the items?
I'd like number E separately.
Okay. We shall proceed then with acceptance of items A through D and F and G together, and then we'll consider E separately. So can I have a motion on the 6 items?
So moved.
Second. Questions, comments? I think this could be a short roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Okay, I now move for the approval of item E separately.
Second.
Discussion? This can also be a short roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary.
I'm abstaining on E.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And the board president's report tonight is going to be about 6 seconds. I have no report.
Excellent.
And filling in for Dr. Williams, we have Dr. Krauser, so you're up, sir.
Thank you. I'm going to kind of share a little bit of Dr. Williams' reports. He's going to be sharing more, as he normally does in his written report, to provide you greater details. So I'll summarize some of the important items that he has for us this evening. And again, excuse me, I want to be reading it to ensure that I make sure his message is clearly shared. He did share that last week was an interesting week as we welcomed Mother Nature into our early winter storm, forcing us to, of course, close one day and delay another. We made what turned out to be some really good decisions last week, and we hope that we continue to do so throughout the remainder of the winter, but as always, be mindful of the safety of our students and our staff as we move through there. As a reminder, we're always going to make the best possible decisions with the information we have at hand in a given moment. Item number 2 was a conversation with regards to the discussions about earlier start times. During the October superintendent's report, Dr. Williams contained some possible options for having our secondary students start their school day at a later time in accordance with the research that shows that teenagers benefit from starting the school day later. The option presented in that report were drafted to get conversations underway about possibly alternating school times for secondary students, which could also affect elementary school day. Any change like this requires a great deal of conversation and consideration, as it will affect the entire school community. Therefore, I have asked the administrative team to begin talking with their constituents, such as PTOs, to get feedback about this option. My hope is that those conversations may elicit alternative ideas for consideration. In order to make very careful and well-reasoned decisions, we would need plenty of time to consider all of these variables. Therefore, any change would not happen for the upcoming school year, and instead, we would be looking to the 2021 school year. We'll use the upcoming comprehensive planning process, led by Dr. Krauser, to craft a structure to more formally explore this concept. Next item is the comprehensive plan. Again, Dr. Krauser is in the early stages of the preparation of this district's next comprehensive plan. He is in the process of gathering the stakeholders that are needed to properly develop this new plan. His task is to work with the school community to create a final draft of the plan for September-October timeframe of next year, so the board will be able to approve this for the November 2019. ACT scores. I'm going to briefly kind of share a little bit about this because the information was just received from our annual college readiness report, but I know Dr. Williams has some additional details that he'll be sharing with you. The organization shares their 2018 graduates, and once again, we performed as compared to our performance as compared to peers across the state. And he's very happy to report that our graduates that took the ACTs in English, math, reading, and science again outperformed their state counterparts in every measurable category. The number of students who take the ACT is not as great as the number of students who take the SAT. 16 students from the class of 2018 took the SAT, which is slightly down from the 26 in the class of 2017. Year after year, though, our graduates have scored very favorably as compared to the state averages. And he'll share an outline and a table with you tomorrow with additional details in those results, which get a comparative approach over the last few years. Overall, again, our graduates outperformed their peer groups across the state. Another item with regards to the data he had received, the ACT provides some data, what it calls value added, to compare our graduates with those who have taken the traditional sequence of courses and how they fare on the Math SAT as well as the Science SAT. So our graduates who took Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, Trigonometry, and Calculus scored on average a 28.5 on the Math ACT, as compared to the state counterparts who scored a 24.4. Our graduates who took Biology, Chemistry, and Physics scored a 31.0 on the Science ACT as compared to their state counterparts who scored a 24.6. So outstanding results, and again, he'll more comprehensive review of that. Also included in your packet is the student enrollment report for this end of the year report for the month of November. And lastly is a conversation about the Future Ready PA Index. The state has released this new system as early of last week, and it replaces the PA School Performance Profile, which replaced the adequate yearly progress from the years before. A new accountability measure contains deliberate metrics to emphasize more than just the traditional standardized test scores and placing additional importance on career readiness. So Dr. Ketterman and myself have kind of shared an overview and introduction to the PA Future Ready Index this evening for you to kind of take a quick brief. So with that, I'll introduce Dr. Ketterman.
Dr. Krauser. As he said, this is really just meant to be a very broad sweep overview of the Future Ready PA Index and give you like literally a snapshot of what you see when you go onto the site. I think the big message that the state is trying to get across is that our students are more than just test scores. So you can go ahead to the next slide. So they've come up with a much more holistic way of measuring and looking at more than just test scores, looking at what else goes into this complicated place called school and how we go about preparing kids for college, for career, and other things, so that we're taking all kinds of things into consideration and not just focusing on test scores. How this came to be, back in 2015, they did a series of focus groups, hundreds of focus groups where they included over 1,000 people to get their input and get their feedback. One of the things that they did as a result of this, they did reduce the testing. I think as you've heard us talk about when we were talking about the PSSA scores, so they did reduce the testing by 20%. And they established some different set of indicators that we're going to hear more about from Dr. Krauser. So what they came up with then is this dashboard approach, and we have a 90-second video here that gives you a nice little overview of what to find out on the site.
Pennsylvanians have been looking for a more comprehensive way to evaluate school progress and student success in the classroom and beyond. Using feedback gathered over 3 years and at the direction of Governor Tom Wolf, the the Department of Education created the Future Ready PA Index. The Future Ready PA Index is a holistic tool that provides communities with a one-stop location for comprehensive information and data on student and school success. FutureReadyPA.org features a dashboard that highlights how schools are making progress across multiple categories rather than solely on standardized test scores. Finding information on your school is simple. You can also filter, compare, and find information on multiple schools, track school progress towards state goals, and view annual improvement data. A color-coded system illustrates student and school progress measured annually via a collection of indicators. These indicators fall into three main categories. Statewide assessment indicators measure student performance on standardized tests, such as the PSSAs and Keystone exams. On-track indicators measure attendance and progress in reading and math. Lastly, college and career-ready indicators illustrate how well students are being prepared for post-secondary success. Explore FutureReadyPA.org and find the information you've been looking for and more.
So as Dr. Ketterman shared, next slide, the state's goal to really give a broader view and allow communities to really focus their measures of success, both based on their local priorities and their local goals, allows this broader sense. You heard the word comprehensive mentioned quite a few times in that video. It is a very comprehensive site. It allows districts to compare, it allows community members to compare information. It breaks it down into what we'll call kind of three buckets, and they are the state assessment measures, the on-track measures, and the college and career measures. And as you can see, they're the shifting away from a single entity as a test score to be our guiding factor, focusing more on what we're doing to meet proficiencies, to measure the growth of each student from year to year. The on-track measures are our goals to reach English language proficiency with all students attendance in school, and of course, they have stop gates for grade 3 in reading and grade 7 in mathematics. And then the broader scale, which I'll say is the one area that they're starting to kind of build while this whole network is up and running, is the college and career measures. And you'll see it when we're going to share some dashboard examples with you. You'll see a chance to just kind of get a holistic snapshot view of some of the original pieces that are coming into play. That is, I'll say, to use the state's words, kind of still under works. A lot of the information is not shared. But what we did do this evening is Dr. Ketterman and I prepared an image for you to look at the dashboard of each school. And it's kind of that home page that you see right here. And really, we could get into a 60 to 90 minute education on this website and this tool. It is large, it is comprehensive. If you look at the image, under each measure, you can click on that and it opens up subgroups. And then from those subgroups, you can click down again. So in an effort to kind of keep an awareness so you're informed, the idea here is that we will kind of share these dashboards with you. And if we look at the next slide, hopefully to walk away with some takeaways on how your responses can be guided towards the conversations now that this is a public site. First and foremost, York Suburban has a lot to celebrate. There are, again, academic measures for our achievement. It continues to be highest with our local competitors and school as a whole. The site is comprehensive. It provides a tremendous amount of detail for individuals to focus and narrow down to the areas in which they want to view it at a closer lens, and what subgroups and what divisions they want to look closer. But most importantly, Dr. Ketterman and I talk about this, is this goal that it's built for this continuing improvement. We're constantly monitoring what we can do to help students grow, and that will be one of our focuses. As you see with that dashboard site, one of the areas that is a focus, certainly in the intermediate and middle grades, is how we're continuing to have that student have that year's worth of growth or beyond for each year. What our plan is to go into greater detail at the Academic Standards and Curriculum Committee meeting. At that point, every building can kind of get into what I'll say in the weeds a little bit more, into some of that minutia, where we talk about what the building strengths are at each level, the opportunities for attacking some of these conversations, where they're going to go, and sharing out their current and future action plans. So the idea this evening was to kind of, as Dr. Ketterman said, kind of give an overview of what's out there and what's available. I can share that even knowing what I'm looking for, there's a lot to dive into, so it's open to the public. It's just a few days old, and I know there's been conversations with other schools that we've been having of how that tool is becoming rich to go into it, and we're eager to see, I'll say again, that last bucket, the college and career, continue to be built and to get into some of those additional measures. Questions?
What is needed then to complete the teacher evaluations from last year, am I correct?
Yes and no. The SPP is still written into the teacher evaluation system, so my most recent information is that they still have to issue an SPP score because it's still part of the 82-1 evaluation. I don't know if you know more.
That's what I've heard as well.
Yeah.
There's nothing else that they have told us yet.
Not finishing the evaluations then, is that what you're saying?
We have not until we get that number.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, no, they have not released that number to us, and again, I'll say it's the same, that the goal is to continue with the SPP number, but they're moving away from the school performance profile concept and moving into the future ready. And as Dr. Ketterman said, it's kind of been that evolution. If we go back to, No Child Left Behind, and then Adequate Yearly Progress, and then moved to the school performance profile, and now we're moving into a more holistic approach with the future ready. And again, not to get lost in the weeds, but they do have interim targets established on closing that gap. So from now to 2030, we've got 13 years to begin to meet those targets as we move through at the achievement level. And then the average growth is measured they convert the growth scale to a point measure, and then that's used at each grade in each division to close those gaps to meet their 2030 goal. And that 2030 goal came from ESSA at the federal level, who said you need broad goals at the state level. And that's kind of how the trickle down occurred.
Was anybody from suburban part of that focus group?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know, Dr. Tibbetts.
Just curious to know how this thing got to be called an index. If you think about the stock market, for example, the Dow Jones averages a number, and then you can break down the constituents to see how that number was derived. The SPP was an index. It was a score that would allow us to look at a very high level some composite number that would rank the schools. That's not possible with this. So I'm just
Correct.
wondering what your reaction is to the use of the term index to characterize it.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I had a conversation with a colleague a week ago, and they referenced a similar concept about the score and the number. And when you get into how they're converting, and I'll use the value added as an example, the value added creates kind of a growth measure, and then they have to convert that to a point index for them to put their interim target. And it comes back to how are we quantifying that, how are we comparing that, and then how are we using that to inevitably make the changes we need to grow the student. So at this point, because it just went public, and to be completely honest, the version that they had shared with us before the public release is different than the public release. In the last 4 or 5 days, Dr. Ketterman and I have been diving in to see what's different. So I'd say yes, pretty much so. The comparative breakdown that you can do to have multiple up at one level and get into the subgroups and see those the comparisons wasn't something. They had mentioned a comparing tool like SPP, and the public PVAS have a comparing tool, but it's like you said, it's more of an index. I can list them all in sequential order and then rank and score them. This is a little different. You can bring up as many schools and divisions as you want on the dashboard. I think there's a limit to 8, but then you can kind of look at each one of the measures, and again, each one of those blue, I'll say blocks, where it says view additional assessment measures, takes you into the subgroups and takes you into the next division. And it's almost one of those you just keep clicking and getting yourself deeper and deeper into it. So until I have a firmer understanding of kind of those pieces, I'm not quite sure about the term index yet.
I think it would be interesting to know where they got their population samples from. For instance, nobody from York Suburban was in here. We've had all of these focus groups. Where did they come from? That's right, all from
What's your feel when you look at this from your perspective now, and the other administrators? What's your takeaway?
I'm a fan of a broader view of students. I think that the concept of being able to relate what we see with success and define success based on the communities themselves. Dr. Ketterman and I have this conversation. So, for example, if we're talking about language proficiencies, certain communities may need to have a greater focus on ensuring their population of students meet language proficiencies because their population might be greater than others. And if they're always focused on meeting an achievement number, I think sometimes they lose sight of what they're doing to gain the language. And by removing the simple concept that we're 100% focused on how they're going to perform at a proficiency on an achievement, we sometimes can't intervene at the areas that we need to most. So I do like that concept. I like that it's more robust and that it's shared K to 12. I like that it creates a progression of opportunities for students. Certainly when we look at that right college and career measures and what we're doing to develop those students in those areas. And I like that it's kind of I'll use their term, on-track measures, that they see a vertical sequence of learning and opportunity, so they tie in the growth, but they put in those important stop gates at grade 3 and grade 7. In the past, I would say they would ensure grade 3 and grade 7 must use this. Now they're giving schools the opportunity to use their own measures to do that. So they're kind of giving some autonomy back to schools. So we have choices in what we use for a grade 3 measurement or a grade 7 measurement.
So are you saying the grade 3 reading and grade 7 math are not PSSAs?
Can be used PSSAs, or you can use other standards-based measures.
And how's that reported? So, for example, if I'm looking at suburban and I want to compare us with Dallastown or the city, and we use PSSAs and they don't, how do I know what makes that number up?
I have not found that on the site yet, but the data comes internally. So when we push our data reports, we have to communicate that data out. But that's a good question, because I haven't been able to find who's using what. I'll say generally, and I'm just using a general term, most of the individuals that I spoke with, even as of last year, as this was getting built, a lot of them were like, just take our PSSA data and we'll go from there, because, to use your comment, we're not sure where they're going to go, how long until this releases. So I think most people kind of played it close to the chest and just provided the information out.
On the front, like for Valley View, just to make sure I'm looking. They
Nope.
don't match any of the,
There's no data to share.
no, okay, there's no data to share, is that what they're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
So unless you see an absolute, so the color indicators are the meets and exceeds the statewide goal, the interim target, or does not meet it. And the arrow just means that there's been a change. So, for example, if you look at, achievement, you might have a dark blue arrow, which indicates that we're exceeding the expectation, but as compared to the year before, there has been an increase or a decrease to those scores.
It's only filled in circles.
Right, yeah. And that's kind of what I was saying about, we can get really deep in there and a lot of the data is not there. Yep.
So statewide, Scott, that means I think that there's no attempt to measure kindergarten, first and second grade in this new index.
Or they haven't clearly communicated exactly what those measurements will be.
When I looked at it, I saw NAs everywhere.
Yeah.
Any school that had a division that was limited to second grade.
Correct.
So is it fair to say that this is going to be less specific, much more generalized, in terms of the public using it? Say I'm somebody moving into this geographic area and I'm interested in learning about strong school districts. Like it or not, that's something that the former system
Absolutely.
was very specific on. When they work the kinks out, when this gets up and rolling as they envision it, if I'm a member of the community that wants to compare school districts, is that going to be an option, really?
I believe so. I believe that the next question would be, in particular, what are you looking to measure? The state's response is, we don't necessarily want you to measure just how they scored on PSSA. So if you're looking for a school or an area that's focused and having great success with providing opportunities, so the career and college readiness, for example, and if you go back one slide, Wendy, for me, please, you can see if you just go back arrow one. There you go. So you can see that involves the credentialing, which we're getting into, the career standards, even items of military enrollments and all those kinds of things. If that is a focused area, and that's what I mean by their ability to determine a school's success based on the priorities of that community or that culture, it gives you a greater level of choice or option if that's an area you want to go. I would still, and this is Scott's opinion, but someone will continue to rank it. I believe that real estate measures will still continue to describe it as they list real estate based on district, because achievement, as you can see, they're the measures they have in place now. So achievement will still be there, and the on-track measures will be the next to catch up. But the idea then is that families or looking to move has that greater choice instead of saying, oh, I'm coming here just because of a test score. And, maybe another example is if I'm a family that has English as a second language, and maybe that's a focus, now I can specifically go, how is this school done for increasing language proficiency with students?
So, this is real data, right? So, the elementary schools and the middle schools, we got a lot of work to do in growth expectations for math.
Correct.
Fabulous when we get to high school. So, the first conclusion I would draw, the only conclusion I would draw from that is the system's flawed.
The system is,
Flawed. Because we can't create fabulous math kids just in high school. We did it before. So what are they getting wrong? It's a great question.
And absolutely, having been here when Dr. Ellis has said repeatedly that he's seen some of the best math improvement over the last few years that he's seen, I think they're the questions that we're trying to figure out. What measure they're using, how different is it, where that assessment comes into play. I would absolutely agree with Mr. Tillman. I think it's a great question.
well, and it would be helpful to see if this is a trend among other districts across the county or across the state. If somebody else is knocking it out of the park at the middle school and at the high school, then we're dropping the ball. I mean, I'm a little cautious to say, oh well, it's a flawed system. If we don't, I mean, just because we're doing poorly, therefore it's a flawed system. Not that that isn't what you're saying. I understand that's not what you mean, but it would be helpful if we could compare other comparable districts to see if they also have this.
Other than the test scores, aren't we comparing against ourselves in this over time?
Improvement.
So
It's hard to
The
improve
growth
when
measure
you're-
is, yes,
Yeah.
the growth measure is a student group of, it has to be at least 20 students, so that's their end count or their measurement count, 20 students. And it's their growth year for years or more.
If I started at 100
Yeah,
and dropped to a 98, my arrow would swing down.
yes.
But again, it's still the same flaws in previous tests, because you're comparing this year's third grade with, or fourth grade with last year's fourth grade instead of that last year's.
No.
No.
So it's all kids.
Kid-centric.
All kids.
It's kid specific, it's group specific, it's class specific. Value added doesn't get to a student level, it gets to a group level.
Okay, you're saying class, so the class of 2022, this is always going to be their comparison, and here, when we look at them, their test scores year by year? No.
No, the state achievement is a single snapshot, so the PSSA has a one snapshot in time. The value added measurement, which is so in the state assessment measures, there's ELA achievement, and then there's ELA growth, and there's math achievement, math growth. The achievement is a snapshot in time. Students take a PSSA or they take a Keystone. The growth measure is how they do from year to year. So if we'll use the 100 students, for example, and let's just take the top 25, and they're all advanced, and let's say they're in the lower advanced end. If they don't stay in that lower advanced end or move up, then they're not measuring a growth for a year. So they could still be scoring at an advanced level, but they're either not moving in that advanced or at least holding their own position for a year.
This is what we've always wanted, though, is that, say, the cohort comparison year by year, instead of as they move through the system, as opposed to, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, I think we always want to make sure we're maximizing capacity, so we're providing students a chance to go as deep and as rich into the content as they can, and the value added does that. The achievement then is to confirm that our curriculum, our written curriculum and taught curriculum, it matches the expectations that we want every student to know and be able to do in the course of a school year.
Well, by then telling us that it matter we've gotten better or we've improved our relationship, not better, we have improved somewhat. If that's year by year, so as Shawnee moves from 3rd to 4th to 5th to 6th grade, and we're still looking at him, that's what was always missing in previous test scores. When we show our people, scores, we're saying, oh, it's last year's 3rd grade and this year's 3rd grade. You don't want that. That's two different.
Correct. That was a single snapshot. So this does add a value added. Mr. Tillman's question, I think, was more of how can we be having high levels of achievement at the high school with, let's say, algebra and the Keystone exam when we're showing students that may be declining in their growth. So where's the error, where's the flaw, or what's occurring, and why is that?
Now, this is a first introduction. Is your plan to do a deeper analysis and then to have a follow-up presentation for us?
Well, we're going to share a little bit of a deeper dive at the Academic Standards and Curriculum meeting next week.
28th.
The 28th. And then, again, having this kind of just go live on us, the word that we were getting from the state all along was it'll release at some point, and then they said it's going to release tomorrow. So all of us, and many of educators as a whole, are diving in to see what's in there. So we're going to present building level information, so each building will share a brief or a summary about what's going very well, what strengths they have, what opportunities exist, and then the actions and plans that they'll do to address at a building level. And we'll do that on the 28th. And then my hope is Dr. Ketterman and I, as we dive in and network more with our colleagues, and I see Ms. A kind of shaking her head, the same scenario that we're hearing more and more from other groups, we'll be able to come back full circle at the end of the year. The SPP question and when that releases is something else we're waiting to hear more on too.
Yeah, I certainly think it would be of interest to what does this mean for York Suburban in comparison to all the relevant comparisons you could make.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And at that point, I think to follow up on Mike's point, how did we compare to, Dallastown and Central and West York, the other neighboring, in terms of this math, debacle? Do you agree?
Absolutely. And I can share that I have dove in a little bit, but you mentioned one school in particular that has a different priority in the culture of what their community would exist. So again, that's kind of the state's response to what exactly, if we're comparing just achievement, or are we comparing the growth, or are we comparing that last measure? But yeah, I think that's kind of where we are. We're looking to see who's out there and what their goals and priorities are as well.
And some of it is shifting a paradigm of the people sitting around this table. Like, it used to be pretty cut and dried about, this was a score and it's easy to see, am I better or worse? But it's a broader...
It's more living, yeah.
What's the support been from the state? So when you have questions on what you're looking at? Well, everybody's laughing, but they put this out there, so
there was a lot.
What's the support there?
They have been sharing information, they funnel it down. They push a lot of the information to the IU, and the IU then pushes information to us. I will say from the state level, and please chime in, Dr. Ketterman, I believe that the concept is, and I'll use kind of that concept of a paradigm. The idea was to respond to the concept that our students are more than just a test score. So the big first push was to say, here's a measurement that we've been getting a more holistic view. What we're hoping to hear more from them is to get then into what is the value added, and if you kind of recall, we used to look at the kind of the vertical graphs where we see is there growth and achievement in the upper right quadrant. And that's the information that we wait to get from the state. That comes from the public PVAS site. eMetric is also another reporting tool that allows us to look at achievement data. So the state has continued to provide us with the resources in that first column, without a doubt. The one I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Kevin, the one that I think many schools are starting to see more on is what are we doing to support our English language proficiency students? What are we doing to continue to increase those college and career measures, and how will those measures look when we start to account for them? Because when you go into the high school, you'll see a lot of them are still NA. They haven't yet defined what that's going to look like for us.
Well, all right, maybe I didn't ask.
I can say, they do have a website too.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, and there's about 1,000 different links here, but,
Webinars and,
but,
there's videos.
so,
and all
if I'm you, and I have a question about what I'm looking at, and I can't find it on the website, who do I call? Who do I email? Is it a forum? Is it, I mean, they're pushing all this and just launching it on everybody last minute, okay? And I'm probably asking a real rhetorical question here, because the Wizards of Smart in Pennsylvania are changing the assessment one more time. But this is not user-friendly. And just by the fact that you are saying, oh, we'll talk with colleagues and everything else, I don't fault you guys. I fault the people that put this out there, because it doesn't sound like there's a system in place to look at and find answers to questions that you have. So, anyway, I know you don't have the answers, or if you do, great, but kind of wading around and waiting for the state to come in and give us data that they're pulling in from all the school districts, which we don't know what's going in there from other school districts. I find this, on first assessment, to be a garbage tool.
Well, I think what we've been kind of gearing ours is, and that's a great question, twofold, is one, to try to connect with our local intermediate units, and they tend to be the kind of the funneling section. And they have set up a series of, I'll say, forums, shall you say, that bring in other curriculum councils to start to digest that. But to answer your question honestly, there isn't a lot of, it's more, I'll say, scientific, it's inquiry-driven. We ask more questions to try to generate more questions to dive in deeper. It doesn't give us a tremendous amount of, if you need this, go here. There is a contact name, a support person that you can contact from the state. I think at this point, a lot of us are just, again, asking questions. What does this data tell us? What are we going to do with it at our level? And it's based on the priorities of each individual district. I'll say another colleague of ours isn't really worried about the assessment measures. They're focused more on the on-track measures. So the conversations and the priorities of the people that are using the tool are starting to be different. In the past, everybody was focused on what your achievement score would be. On ELA, math, it was pretty simple. Everybody needed to get, we were on our way to 100% proficiency. Now that they've removed that and they provide a little bit more choice option, if a district, for example, is choosing to focus more on industry credentialing, and that's going to be their goal, they're moving in a different direction, and their conversations are less about whether or not the students are meeting a specific proficiency mark. The state's response to that is, okay, to ensure that everybody gets it, we're going to put interim targets every year to make sure you're on track with that. Now, what happens when that doesn't meet? We don't know that yet either. So I'm probably not answering the question I think you're asking, because we haven't really given a very specific answer.
I would argue this is a convenient way to play with the numbers constantly.
I don't know that it's playing with the numbers.
Oh, I'll tell you right now, it'll...
20 different ways to win.
20 different ways to win.
You just focus on the one that, it allows you to paint the picture the way you want to, which they could throw this away and just let the districts do that on their own, and it would work without it.
Yeah.
Not unlike giving all the kids a trophy.
Pretty much.
This gives the people who want to filter it the way you just suggested, a chance to pass the buck to PDE to say it's their data, not our, well, it's our data, but they've sanctioned it by publishing it here. So an example would be the editorial that Dr. Holmes put in the paper a couple of weeks ago that used the early results and talked about growth and only growth. There was no reference whatsoever to performance. And when you look at the performance in his schools, it's totally out of sync with the growth measures. You see high 70s and high 80s in the growth area, and you see proficiencies in the single and low double digits. There's a gigantic disconnect. So that worries me about the utility of something like this on a statewide basis.
Well,
it costs millions and millions of dollars to put it together.
Absolutely. And it's all well and good to have the career-ready measures and all of those things, but if you have seventh graders who cannot perform proficient math scores are,
Well, 3 of his 7, for example,
No.
scored 0.
no,
Proficiency.
I mean, actually, I prefer looking at ours than
Well, I'm just saying, to
across
validate
town.
the tool, you need
No.
to look beyond us.
Right, but my concern is all of those other extraneous things, that's all well and good, but at the end of the day, you want your students to be able to be proficient at certain basic things. I know we're saying the same thing, but it worries me that all the fluff isn't helping us see how we're doing.
Well, all I can say is as you wade through this pool, arguably a cesspool right now, please keep us informed if you're not getting answers, because that's on our shoulders then to express our displeasure or pleasure to our legislators about this tool that's been forced upon
That really falls
upon the
on everybody's
districts.
shoulders. We all need to be
Yep.
activists when it comes to evaluating
Yeah.
getting
Yep.
the millions and millions that we spend on education in this state.
Dr. Krauser, if I could follow up on that line of reasoning, and I want to choose my words carefully because I don't want it to sound too flip, but as an educator, I think you mentioned that this is going to be in place for 13 years or so.
2030 is their target goal as set by every student.
How confident are you that this system will actually be around in 2030? And I'm not trying to be a wise guy, but I mean, we go through all these iterations every couple of years.
Correct, and we just kind of walked that trail with, first it was the AYP, and then it was the school performance profile, and I will absolutely, with all my diligence, ensure that we continue to do it as long as it's there. I can assure you that. That's a guarantee.
Political answer.
Good answer.
Didn't take long to figure this seat out, did it?
This reminds me of a scene from Bang the Drum Slowly. There's a card game,
Yeah.
Peg War, the exciting game without any rules. I mean, this strikes me as T-War. Exciting evaluations without any rules.
In 2030, we'll still be saying to him.
If I'm alive, I'm
No,
going to
no,
be...
no. We'll still be asking, did you finish the teacher's evaluations on time? Are we like this year?
And maybe we'll say, as soon as we get that SPP score, we're gonna work on those evaluations.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And that concludes Dr. Williams' report.
Do you have reports from administrators?
Oh, that is still on my list. I see 2 outstanding administrators out there. So we'll start with the new middle school principal, Mr. Shirey, to join us, please.
Ladies first.
And Mr. Steers, just to answer, Dr. Maloney and I were both at one of the focus groups in 2015-16 school year.
So we blame you for this.
What I can tell you was that while you would think a focus group would be, let's sit around and take input, this was already worked out. This was completely worked out. It was what kind of, if you want an opportunity to purchase or create or purchase your own 7th grade assessment, what would you like it to be? That was the question. So this was already done. Okay, so middle school. I've been there for 8.5 days. So don't expect a long-term report. I'm going to give it to you in what we did in about a week and a half. Upper right-hand corner, you'll see 2 pictures. This was a field trip. It was called the Writer's Eye Competition. They came to an art gallery, and then based on their impressions from the art gallery, then they are allowed to submit a writing sample by January to be in a competition that will be awarded in March. We do it every year, and what I'm told is that we have quite a few award winners from this competition. In the upper left-hand corner, so we had Veterans Day. We had 9 visitors come as a tradition at York Suburban Middle School, in which they come and they greet, and our students greet them and show our pride for what they've done to our country. Lower right-hand corner, we raise trout in our science classroom, so we bring in live eggs. And it's a big to-do as to when these eggs are going to arrive, because as soon as they arrive, we need to get them in the proper tanks and everything. So if they arrive at 4:30 at night, the science teachers are driving back from wherever they were to get them, and we'll get them in the building, to get them in the tank, so it was a big to-do. The picture in the background is actually painted by students they stick it behind the fish tank. It's kind of hard to see, but it's a kind of a scene from SpongeBob, so you think about it in middle school. That's what it's going to be. And so anyway, the fish will swim in the water that's in front of it, and we did have our first hatching, and it was Ace, I think. Yeah, they named the fish Ace, so we have a little fish floating around. Left-hand side, we did release our honor roll and distinguished honor roll names. So on the left-hand side, you will see the gathering of students to see if their name was on the list. We had, in 6th grade, we had a total of 82% of our students who were either honor roll or distinguished honor roll. In 7th grade, we had 60% of our students, and in 8th grade, we had 57% of our students. So we had quite a few students who are extremely proud of themselves and the work that they accomplished during that first marking period. So that is my report for what has happened in the past 8.5 days, other than a lot of learning and other things. Any questions?
Thank you for coming back for 7.5 days.
Thank you.
Nice to know.
I have a question on the honor roll numbers. So you went from 82 to 60 to 57, and Dr. Krauser, I'm going to ask you this question as well, because we talked about this before. Has there been any revisiting of the measurement of honor roll and distinguished honor roll? It seems like an awfully high percentage, number one. Number two, going from 80 down to 50 to 60%. What do you think is going on with the fall off between 6th and 7th grade?
Did you want to add, or would you like me to add?
Anything that I say will just be presumption at this point, I'll be honest.
And we had this conversation last year, and,
Yep.
and we started to dig a little bit deeper at the guidance level to that. There's a couple items. At the 8th grade level, for a majority of students, we do add another core academic, and that's a world language. So that adds another indicator that sometimes influences that. Another item that we're seeing is, and again, kind of as it relates to the achievement level, we're seeing declining performance levels in achievement with some students, and a lot of hypothesized, a lot of, I'll say, are we seeing a compounding effect with regards to the mathematics? And is that ladder of achievement starting to, the gaps being more exposed, does that influence on their performance of how the students are performing? A lot of the questions we've been having most recently as our conversation was kind of spawned me with guidance, was just a middle school child, and where they start to say, well, this doesn't count, or I don't want to do this, and how much of it is, those of us who've ever had a middle schooler can tell you, they just forget about it, I don't want to do it kind of scenario, and or trying to push a limit to see how far they can go and see how far they can recover. But we haven't been able to put a specific finger on exactly what it is. At that point, these are the things that we're trying to monitor more closely. On the reverse end of that, I can say, when I was in the building, I was meeting with students that were either on the borderline, that historically had been high performance, that all of a sudden were turning things off. Another example that we see with 7th and 8th graders is oftentimes what I'll say the eligibility effect, that when they're involved in an activity, and eligibility becomes an important requirement, their performance is on par. When they step off of that sports team or that eligibility requirement, their, I'll say, connection of having it be purposeful or be permanent in their eyes allows them to kind of take that break. And the last piece that I think we've been talking about as a district for quite some time is where does the social emotional stressors come into play. The last 2 years in particular, I know the 8th grade counselor has shared great concerns about the number of stressors that our 7th grade students going into the summer and returning 8th graders seeing, and how that creates a balance. So I don't have a definitive answer for it, but I can say the conversations continue to be a big part of where we are. Because inevitably we see, kind of moving into high school, and Mr. Shire could probably respond more to that, is where the students then, that number even falls more drastically. And what happens to those freshmen when the failure rates increase, and those kinds of concerning areas for us.
What are the numbers in the high school? I don't know if you remember it. What honor roll, distinguished honor roll? I mean, are they in the 50 to 60% range per class, or
lower.
or lower? So does it continue a downward slide, or?
Continue to go down between 9, 10, 11, and 12.
Yeah.
But 9 is typically where you see a dip, and then it'll start to increase from there. 9th is a hard transition year. For I would say all students, it's a tough one, just because of the transition. So yeah, you would see another slight dip in 9th grade before it bounces back and stays up. So it doesn't get back to where in 6th grade we had 82%. To me, it's a proud number, but I haven't peeled back the layers, and I haven't just been there enough to.
See, I would tend to think, I would be more suspicious of the 82 than the 57. I think there's a rigor problem in reverse, that it's too easy and then it becomes more realistic. Because, you draw your bell curve, by the time they come out of middle school, they're where they should be. So I think maybe, maybe we're too easy at the lower end of that. So all these people are doing we're giving them all trophies.
Well, these strike me as very complex issues.
Yeah.
Though it's interesting that we're discussing this in relationship to the PA index. So another question is, as the proficiencies have changed over time, how has that correlated with the changing honor roll, distinguished honor roll percentages over time, and what should the relationship be between those two? That seems to me a significant discussion point.
Yes, and I know Dr. Ellis at the high school has run those numbers typically yearly to look at the correlation between performance in the class versus performance on assessment, whether it be SAT or ACT. And we would look at that carefully when I was there, to make sure you don't want to see something that's uncorrelated, I'll put it that way. But we do also recognize that a simple singular exam does take into, we do have to be realistic that it was a singular exam event versus sometimes, when you want to be measured, you want to be measured over a longer period of time with multiple assessments and multiple opportunities to show what so we do keep that in. But typically the correlation between student achievement grades, marking period grades, were highly correlated to performance, typically.
Right, and it also strikes me that part of the point of grades is to create the right incentive structures for achievement going forward, and so that adds a layer of complexity in terms of what is the best grading outcomes with respect to then performing the best outcomes on proficiency tests, and the correlation might not be exact in that respect.
And I'll put another layer on leveling, choosing the level of rigor that, especially at the high school level, when you can choose that particular pathway based on your future. So that adds another layer of complexity. If I were taking an easier course versus a very difficult AP course, that grade, even though I would be the same individual, my grade would probably be slightly different in those two courses, just because of rigor and maybe background knowledge that they would want.
I have a question, much simpler than this. Do we post our honor roll people on our website?
On the website?
Yes.
I do not believe so.
District that celebrates academic success. I'm seeing a picture of those very proud students who want to see it. Our community would also be very proud to be able to see those. It's amazing to me that we can do it. You used to post these amazing.
Yeah.
Everybody did.
Everybody is sent. Now, there's the reason why you can't submit it to the paper.
Yeah, I know the last 2 years, going back when I was in middle school, there was a shift. No, that's a great, and having seen that in the social media that Mr. Shire in middle school had shared with the excitement of those students, it is really good.
I might suggest, I totally agree that we need to have it on the, but post it in the hall first.
Oh, I'm not saying that. Yeah, we don't have to be official.
Let them fight for that on,
We don't have
in
to be
school,
official.
and then
It can go on like
the
a
next day or two,
newspaper.
put it online.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Showery. Dr. Furman?
Hi, everyone. So, I'm going to talk some more about math. But before I do that, it's all kind of connected here. In fifth grade, our students go through a cycle in related arts, a STEAM class. And within their STEAM class that they have 1 day per cycle, they rotate through chorus or multiple other different STEAM options. And so there was one group of fifth graders that just finished up a rotation with Mrs. Dean. And very low-tech STEAM engineering design process, they had to, in collaborative groups, come up with what they thought was a school problem or issue, and then they needed to define the problem, outline some research, and make a recommendation or a solution to the problem. And so I had a number of meetings with fifth grade boys who firmly believe that they need to have more recess time. And so, and I mean, they have wonderful arguments and research to support it, and in my heart of hearts, I don't totally disagree with them, but I only have so many minutes in a day for math and ELA and science and everything else, but I agree with them, they really do need to get outside some more. So, in meeting with the boys, and it was boys, the girls were all on board once they heard about it. The girls were quick to get on board as well, but it was the boys who chose this as their problem, multiple groups in this one rotating section. And so, you know, we talked and bantered back and forth and had these discussions, and so I told them what was important to me was math fluency in our building, and that we needed to strengthen fact fluency and their ability and automaticity with facts. And so together we brainstormed this idea of, and then it moves to the center picture, our front lobby. So we brainstormed this idea of why don't we set different benchmarks for addition, subtraction, and multiplication. And each time a grade level reaches the benchmark, because I don't want to single any one student out or not, and the greater good of all of them. So once the students reach a benchmark, that they would get extra open gym time or extra recess time. So Mrs. McClure and Mrs. Pottinger, they came in Wednesday night, and they painted, we did a first test, if you will, to get what our current proficiency rates were in those different areas. And then right in our front lobby, this is chalk paint, it'll come off with some soap and elbow grease and whatnot in a couple of months sort of thing. We went ahead and we charted where each of the proficiency levels were for each of the grade levels, so the kids can see it. Every 2 weeks, they're going to take a quick math test, or computation test, and as they reach the different benchmarks, all the way up to 95% proficiency, then we will keep giving them different options of, if the weather's nice like today, some outdoor time, or possibly pulling them in different sections in the gymnasium, open gym. So while this whole process wasn't anything that you'll see anywhere in the PA Future Ready Index, I believe that my kids learned research skills, they learned collaborative skills, they worked on public speaking skills, and I think that those are all things that are immeasurable, that are going to help them succeed middle school, high school, and in life sort of thing. So I just wanted to go ahead and share that with you. Thank Mr. Toman for his comments about the math, because I'm somewhere in the middle here, in that ultimately when you look at the math scores in my building, I do believe we produce overall a strong product, preparing kids for a foundation to do well in high school math, but there's a lot of red when you look at elementary math, and so we need to do something differently there. Something's not quite adding up, something's not working. In my personal opinion, one of the areas where we've seen the data tie together is with this idea of the automaticity of the math facts, that when the kids start reading these 3- and 4-step problems, if they don't know what 7 times 5 is, they're hung up here and forget step 2 to 3 to 4 over here. When you look at some of the math data from my building and some of the different benchmarks that we use, on tests that measure mathematical knowledge, my students perform well in national percentiles. When you look at a PSSA test, that is a test that tests their ability to read math. There's a whole lot more reading involved on that test. Now, I do want my kids to get to the point where they can be successful with that higher order thinking and problem solving, but I believe for the benefit of my students, I need to back it up a little bit and start here and work my way into those areas. So I agree with what both of you are saying, trying to find that balance somewhere in the middle and feed both ends of it, if you will, for my students and my staff. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to share with you, that should be linked, Wendy, is last year, when East York had received its Title I Distinguished Schools grant, we used some of the monies to purchase books for a One School, One Book program. And it was probably the best community building event that we did throughout the year last year, and I was just really proud of it. And so because it mattered to me and to my staff, and we thought that it was good, I did set aside some monies in my own budget so that I could continue to purchase the books. And so we're going to, even though we don't have a grant this year, Ms. Stover and I and a team of teachers has selected a book, and you are all invited on January the 17th for the big book unveiling and different family fun activities that we'll have in our new lobby space and in the cafeteria, and it'll be a great event for everyone. I'm working with Whitson's. Again, they're going to cater a meal beforehand. Last year, they were able to, it was like $4.25 for a baked ziti, a salad, dessert sort of thing. We had about 20 families come out for the meal, and another 60 to 65 kids and their families came for the book unveil, if you will, to pick up their book and to participate in the family fun activities. And then everybody got their book the next day. So we do have that baseline experience. I think now that everyone knows what it's about, I really think that our numbers will be up this year and even more people will come and participate. So mark your calendars, you're welcome to come, and once I get those dinner reservations and know what I'm feeding you, I'll send you that as well.
Just a quick question, and this is great. I think all of these things are very interactive with the kids and the parents, and you're bringing in a lot of different constituencies. You mentioned you're setting aside some of your budget for this event. Mm-hmm. Can you put a dollar figure around what that would be? Just ballpark.
Ballpark, I budget, I think that the books cost right around $2,000 to provide one book for every student in my building and staff member to truly make it a true community event. Last year, we just kind of mom and popped it together, the family fun activities, because we weren't really sure what to expect or what to do. This year I'm splurging a whopping $200 on my family fun activities. I've got, I can't tell you too much more about it. I've got 2 people coming in, and Mrs. Potts did my shopping at Amazon just this week, so.
Is this something, I know we've hit on this topic before, but is this something that some of our third-party organizations could help with, like YSEF?
I would love to say, I don't think so, because the way my understanding of their grant funding cycles, because it's something that they would do it once potentially. So maybe if Indian Rock wanted to try this, do you know what I mean? Like they could probably maybe fill out a grant and get a one-time, but if it were a reoccurring sort of thing.
I would recommend you reach out to them and see if there's the ability to work with you on that. And then in the alternative, is this something that how's the PTO forming?
I have one this year.
So that would be something that the void would be filled with a PTO effort. Would other PTOs at other schools be willing to help out with this? I hate to see you use your budget for something that I know there are parents that would probably be willing to help offset that cost. And when I hear you're using your own funds where that could be utilized for other things like school supplies or whatsoever else, I mean, it's a great effort. So anyway, I'm throwing ideas out there to you, and more than happy to chat after the meeting if you'd like. So
I'd also like,
You had your hand up, sorry.
I also wanted to comment on, I went to this event last year, and one feature of this that I think is so terrific is it's a way for parents to get involved in the school system at an academic level. Whereas so many times when parents become involved, it's an athletic event or some extracurricular event, but for the parents to see actual academic programming and participate in it, I think is absolutely fantastic. So I think it's just the right kind of event that York Suburban should be doing.
Thank you. One of the things that evolved after I introduced it to you last year is to make it accessible to all of our parents. What we'll do is we will have the staff read the text, and then we upload it to a website, and so each student's given a read-along calendar, and so if their parents are unable to read to them or with them, all they have to do is click on mom or dad's or aunt's or grandma's electronic device, and they can hear a familiar East York staff member read a passage to them. So, and I had a number of parents say they could sit down and listen to it and read along with their child. So it makes academics accessible to all of my family.
Yeah, well, I thought this was an awesome idea when you did it last year, and I'm thrilled that you're continuing it, and expanding and improving it. So great work on that.
Thank you.
I also applaud you for identifying your math issue.
Well, it's my hunch, it's what I think it is. I'm still working, I haven't found the holy grail, and I can't talk.
You're right. Our kids are not fluent in math, because we teach them 27 different methods to do problems, instead of hammering the facts in. You know, I've had 3 kids that I still have to hammer facts into in high school. Their flaws aren't their ability to do math. It's that they make things they should already know too hard. They don't understand fractions. They don't understand, fractions, decimals, like they're not numbers to them. And so you're on it. That is exactly what needs a focus, and I'm glad that you're focusing on it, because you will improve those kids by focusing on the facts. They get good at those, they'll have the rest of it. They don't have that. They have all the other things. They don't have fact fluency. I'm 3 for 3 on that.
I do believe, because our kids are roughly the same age, and so knowing that my kids were some of the first to experience everyday math as they moved through the district, one thing that I've noticed from when my kids attended East York to now that I attend East York is that the growth of everyday math, in that it's less, they still present multiple ways to solve problems, but much sooner, I would say as early as 3rd and 4th grade, they're setting the kids loose to choose the strategy that works best for them, instead of forcing, one strategy this year and then one strategy this year. So the program has evolved since our kids went through.
Because that's really the issue to me. If they know the normal way to do it, and they get it, they don't need the other strategies. It's the kids that aren't getting that need the other strategies. So if they're getting turned loose and not kind of wasting their time learning that, because I felt like they don't ever get all those anyway. They go back to the one that's most comfortable, which is usually what I consider to be the normal way. It's also the way they end up having to do it in high school. So,
When somebody at home helps them with it, right?
Or tries to teach them when they're in high school something they should already know. No, I think that great effort on both parts there, and I was not criticizing.
Oh, no, I know, I just,
and
no,
I actually figured out
didn't
why
think it that
those are
way.
red, because they're growth. You can't grow when you've already hit the proficiency, or you can't grow as much.
For some of them, like if you look at, for example, like my science will look great in the achievement part at 86%, but then when you look at the growth, it's saying that it's red, I didn't grow the kids enough.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Those wraps up Dr. Williams' report.
Ms. Mason?
Yeah. The administration recommends board approval of the resolution certifying the tax rate for the 2019-20 budget, that it will not have a tax increase that exceeds the Act 1 index of 2.7%.
So moved.
Second. Question?
I will be voting against this because I feel that it's, to be as diligent as we possibly can, we need to put all the possibilities out on the table, go looking at the, exceptions that we might be able to get, have it out on the table, even if we don't use it. So I will be voting against this.
Other comments? Roll call.
Toman,
Yes.
Schrader,
Yes.
Posnow,
Yes.
Sears,
Yes.
Skelet,
Yes.
Freiberg,
No.
Sanders,
Yes.
Robinson.
Yes.
Next item, I'm taking together B and C. It's, the administration is asking the board to approve advertising and soliciting for bids, for network, and WAN connections that are needed at the various buildings in the district.
Second.
Joel, did you make the motion?
A second.
He seconded it. Mike.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. You can do the,
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear otherwise. Motion approved. I'll take the next two items together as well. The board, they're both agreements. The first one is the approval of the IDA pass-through funds with the Lincoln Intermediate 12. And the second one is the approval of the contract with the PA Trust for the GASB 4575 valuation services with Conrad Siegel.
So moved.
questions, comments?
Could you explain what the PA Trust, evaluation is?
It's, what it is this is the GASB, statements that we have to, the valuations for the OPEB that we have to have done every year for the audit. Every 2 years, we get evaluated by Conrad Siegel. And the reason it's Conrad Siegel is because PA Trust did a bid, if you will, for the whole state. And that's why it's Conrad Siegel. It's very similar to our CoStarz contract and KPN. In this particular instance, it's PA Trust, which actually operates out of the CSIU in Lewisburg.
So this is every 2 years?
Right. The reason it's on our agenda this year is because we've always done it through the LBT when we were a part of the trust. Now that we were on our own, we have
You
to.
have to go out and get the value. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I have a question on item B. Does that show in the budget?
Yes.
Okay.
It shows both revenue and expense.
How close is that number to the budget this year?
I'm sorry, I did not check that. I will check it and get back to you.
Questions? This will be a short roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. The last item, the administration recommends board approval of the 2017 audit report.
So moved.
Second.
Questions? Those of you that didn't get to sit in on the finance committee report, it was a good report. Their administrative team's done a great job, so thought I'd throw that out there.
Woo-hoo! This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. You have the dining review report and sales report, activity report for October. Any questions on those? That concludes my report.
Did you do C?
Did I do C? Yes, that was
Yeah.
combined with B.
Yeah.
Ms. Geyer?
Okay, I'd like to begin my report by congratulating all of the fall sports teams who found postseason success, as well as our 19 student athletes who earned spots on county and/or district-wide all-star teams. Of these 19, on the county level, there were 9 first-team recipients, 5 second-team recipients, and 5 honorable mentions. On Friday, the winter sports season began, so keep an eye out for the first games and meets of the season. A short while ago, the High School Student Council hosted the Color Clash and raised a total of $1,700 for our mini-thon benefiting 4 Diamonds. And currently at the high school, we are having a No Shave November competition in which certain male teachers from each department are competing their facial hair growing skills against each other to raise money for our mini-thon. The winner then gets to tell the losers how to shape their facial hair. And in total, right now, we have over $1,300 raised. Last Friday, Valley View hosted a lunchtime Thanksgiving feast for kindergartners and their family members to enjoy, and the students enjoyed wearing pilgrim hats and watching a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. On Saturday, the CTC Variety Show was held at the high school, which is always a widely enjoyed community event. On November 29th, a ceremony will be held for numerous high school students distinguished with the honor of being inducted into National English Honor Society as well as National Honor Society. And on December 1st at Indian Rock, students and their families have been invited to enjoy the annual pancake breakfast hosted by the PTO there. And for the time being, us students are mostly just counting down the hours until Thanksgiving break. That's all I have. Thank you.
You have the committee meeting schedule linked online. Mr. Robbins, communications.
Thank you, Mr. Posnell. The activities and communications reports are provided. We're happy to announce that the next articles appearing in the Township newsletter will feature a hard-hitting article about the assistant superintendent who will be fighting for truth, justice, and adequate sleep cycles for all of our students. We'll probably follow that up next time with an article on the middle school principal with the title of something like Attack of the Killer Trout or something like that. That concludes my report.
Ms. Farrar.
Oh, this is gonna be dull and boring.
It's always good, don't try.
Yeah, I'm not, believe me. You have before you the minutes of the October 3rd meeting, and in our most recent meeting, we had, quite a lengthy discussion about upcoming, capital projects. If you received the information, even if you were not at the meeting, we are holding off on doing a lot of prep work until we get the results of the feasibility study update sometime in January to see what other recommendations they may have for us. But some of the things that we are moving ahead with will be the issue of roofing projects and flooring projects, along with getting some other architectural and engineering information for some things such as the high school gym floor and things that will need to be done. Even if we make other changes to buildings, we still have to do the roofs, we still have to make sure the flooring is adequate and those kinds of things. So stay tuned as we head into January and February. That concludes my report.
Okay, the minutes of the September 12th meeting are provided. They're linked, and I think there might be copies, but they were approved by the 2 members of the committee who were present. The administrative report, Ms. Mason brought forward the audit report, which is presented by Smith Elliott Kearns and Company. We got a clean, unmodified audit. Very dry language, which means we did great. There were no negative findings, and the operation of our finance office is spot on. So kudos to that entire staff. We did also talk about borrowing. We've talked about this resolution that we have, our parameters resolution, and we've talked about breaking about a $17 million facility into 2 draws of roughly $10 million and $7 million. $10 million would cover the 19-20 projects roughly once we lock that down. So the discussion was, do we borrow now or do we wait until 5 or 6 months elapse so that we're closer to the time that we would actually need the money? Given the likelihood that interest rates will increase at least 25 basis points, we had the folks from RBC take a look at some of the projections, and it looks like there's roughly a $300,000 advantage to the district if we borrow now. and we just lock down that rate. And point being, that we're gonna use the money anyway, well within the parameters, period. So that was the recommendation of the Finance Committee, and, basically that was it. Our next meeting is not December 12th, that was on the calendar, that will be canceled. As I understand it, the January meeting won't actually be set until after the reorganization meeting and the committee meeting schedule is set. That ends my report.
Mr. Roberts, one up from the last.
I'll try. You have before you the personnel report, which includes resignation, employment, and volunteers. Would any board member like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not, the chair moves approval of the below-mentioned items.
Question, comment? Short roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
And if I may, I think it comes under the heading of personnel. The nominations committee will be convening prior to the board meeting on December 3rd at 5:30. We were going to try for a smoke-filled room someplace, but in the interest of health regulations, we'll do it here.
In public meeting.
Beg pardon?
And the sunshine law.
And the sunshine. Yeah, that's probably technicality.
That also.
Oh, that too.
You can smoke in public.
John, I think it might be appropriate, given that we have a long list of folks who have agreed to volunteer in various capacities at the district, just to add a thank you to them for their willingness to serve.
Thank you for your willingness to serve. Mr. Brown.
Policy Review Committee is bringing forth 8 super exciting policies. Quite as exciting as communications, but we're bringing forth 8 policies for approval. Does anyone have any questions or comments on those policies? Seeing none, the chair will move to approve those policies.
Second.
Questions?
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
The Dawn's Early Light highlights are posted online here. Ms. Fryer?
Yes, and the LIUJOA, as hard as we tried, couldn't get a quorum this past week, so there was no actual official meeting. We did go through some of the items on our agenda and with the treasurer's report and the audit report, but nothing was voted on. The next meeting will not take place until January, at which time we will have a budget that will be presented to us and then sent out to the districts for their consideration. That concludes that report. Your Gathers Academy report, surprise, we're working on our budget, but more interestingly, regarding program, we're working on some new career opportunities for our students to enhance their experiences at Your Gathers Academy. We're also looking at an opportunity for them to test out certain courses. If they feel that they can do that, they're given one opportunity to test out some of these courses that they may be able to do. We so far have had several students who have tried and have succeeded, so we're kind of pleased with that initiative. We have begun sort of if you will, planning, looking to the future, brainstorming kind of thing to see where we want to be in 2, 3, and 5 years. And of course, technology is coming out very high on the list, but we also want to be very vigilant of our one-on-one and the attention that we've always been very proud that we have given to our students, and they always comment on it when we get to the graduation exercises. So stay tuned to see how we continue our relevance in the educational community. And that concludes my report.
Ms. Mason, York Adams Tax Bureau?
No report.
We meet tomorrow evening, so I don't really have any further report than that.
Everybody in the group, thank you for sitting with us tonight. There is a link to the remaining board meetings and committee schedules for the rest of the year, such that it is. And this is your last opportunity for public comment.
I just thought it should be noted that Ms. Geyer was one of those first-team athletes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I, yes.
I want to say, we just moved to the area at the beginning of the school year.
Please come up to the.
Sure.
Tell us where you live.
I can't tell you where I live, no, I'm kidding.
Give us
Oh, my name is Vanna Bowlin. I have 3 kids in this school district, an 8th grader, a 6th grader, and a kindergartner. And, I have to say they are very happy. We just moved, from around Allentown area. And, I get emotional when I talk about the move, but, the kids love York Suburban, and they're very pleased. The teachers are very welcoming, principals were so happy. I mean, it's nice to see such a nice community welcoming us into the school in a very nice way. We really appreciate it. So I wanted to say thank you, take this opportunity since I'm sitting here, and address it as how happy my kids are to be in the school district.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's a good way to end.